Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first of hopefully many joint webinars from Inteserra and Ceretax. I'm Brent Reeves, co-founder and CRO of Ceretax, and I'll serve as the moderator. Today, we're going to discuss some of the biggest tax impacts in the communication industry from this past year. In addition, we're going to look ahead and see what we think 2023 is going to bring us. But before we get started, let's take a minute to introduce our companies. Ceretax is the newest, most advanced tax calculation and reporting platform available on the market today. The team behind Ceretax has decades of experience in the communications industry. This is actually our third generation product that we've brought to market, having worked in the past with everyone from tier one carriers all the way down to startup mobility providers. Ceretax works through a simple API connection or batch file transfer to your billing, POS, shopping cart, or ERP. And in real time, we will calculate any imposition at the federal, state, or local level for both taxes as well as all the regulatory fees so that you know exactly what you need to collect from your customers and where to remit those fees, and then have all of that data backed up in case you ever get audited and need to reference it. So now let me introduce Tom Fort with Inteserra. Tom is the Director of Business Development and has over 40 years in the communications industry. Tom will give us a little background on Inteserra and then take us through the presentation. Tom?
Thanks, Brent. Yes, Inteserra has been around for almost 40 years, been doing regulatory work. We do tax compliance, regulatory compliance, what we call advisory services or consulting type services, market entry, Secretary of State registrations, items like that. We have platform solutions, which are web-based support and documentation so you can keep track of rules and regulations in the states that you're in, as well as ongoing training and education. We like to position Inteserra to be your regulatory department. So we're going to start with a recap of 2022, what changed and why those changes mattered to your company. And how do we get here and where are we going? Highlights of 2022 that we're going to talk about, and these happen to be in alphabetic order. They're in no specific order, so we put them in alphabetical order. The Affordable Connectivity Program, the Broadband Data Collection, Universal Service Fund, both federal and state issues, and then some VOIP issues. When we're done with that, we're going to look over the horizon into 2023. We're going to talk a little bit about Q1 regulatory fees and funds. We're going to talk about some other regulatory obligations in first quarter 2021 and some other regulatory matters. And then Brent and I will give some closing thoughts as we end the sessions. So the first item we're going to talk about, ACP. ACP had its initial growth from the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program that was created in 2021 and just ran for a limited time in 2021. It was a small fund, and I say small tongue-in-cheek. It's $3.2 billion fund. Then they, with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, they sort of rolled some things together and they created the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP. That was a $14.2 billion fund. It went into place on December 31st, 2021. There is currently, as of November 7th, 2022, there are 1,652 providers in the ACP program. They are, of those, 1,492 just offer a broadband service, and about 160 of them offer some type of broadband service with connected devices or just connected devices. In 2022, as you saw, they went from 3 billion to 14 billion. So there's more money available for reimbursement. At the same time, when they made that jump to more money, they also reduced the benefit to the subscriber. The initial benefit was a $50 a month plan. And since then, in the change from EBB to ACP, it was reduced to a $30 plan. It's available, but the good part about it was EBB was only limited to certain plan offerings. ACP is unlimited to the plans that you have in service. The tablet and phone benefit option is still the same, and that option is you get a one-time benefit for a tablet or a phone. And there was no change for reimbursement for tribal lands. Now, there are some impacts in 2023 that you have to be aware of and what's going to happen. One is going to be, because this program has been in effect for a year, there's a re-enrollment process. That's going to kick in 2023. So if you sign somebody up in 2022, sometime in 2023, there will be a re-enrollment requirement. It looks like the number of authorized providers that are filing for ACP services is slowing down a bit. The FCC and USAC will focus on a few things this year. They're going to focus on the transfer in, transfer out process. They're also going to focus on program audits because there will be, as we have seen during 2022, there has been more audits from USAC auditing ACP providers, looking at records, looking as did the customer have any data services? Are they still eligible for the service? So those are things that are coming aboard in 2023. Broadband data collection. This was a big change to the industry in 2022. If you've been in the industry a while, you know that there was the FCC Form 477, which recorded broadband services, VGE or voice grade equivalent services, think CLEC, and VoIP services. Well, in mid 2021, they started working their way toward what they were going to do, the BDC, which was a broadband data collection, which was sort of a more granular way to gather broadband information because they realized that the 477 process was a limited process and that they were not really getting what they needed into broadband maps, which were driving quite a bit of funding mechanisms. So they started the broadband BDC collection in 2022. Some of the highlights of that was it was driven for all facilities-based providers of fixed or mobile broadband. Internet access will be required to file broadband available data twice a year. We're going to talk in the next slide a little bit about when those are due. The initial filing window for BDC was September 1st of 2022, but due to systems issues, they sort of extended the filing window for a while until people got everything in. The big change for BDC was they took you from a locations passed type filing to a polygon filing, which was sort of a ability to make an out boundary around these service areas that you're going to provide service at. And the boundaries were based on different speeds, different upload and download speeds, different types of services you provided, whether it was fiber, fixed wireless, or whatever. So it was just a different mechanism. And the other thing that it also brought about was a challenge issue process initiated. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well on the next slide. But what is the impact going into 2023? There could be the potential end of the 477 filing sometime in 2023. It hasn't been finalized yet. There's just been some discussion about it. There may be further granularity with BDC filings so that the polygon process may even get more granularized as 2023 comes about. It always happens when the FCC and FCC does anything because they want more data, they want more information. There was no change in the due dates. The due dates are the same. So the due dates are March 1st, you have to have a filing in, and those are for lines and services as of December 31st of the previous year. And then September 1st, there's another filing. Those are for lines and services as of June 30th of the present year. So it's just something to remember to put on your calendar is after the end of the year, after the end of June, go get a dump and download of all your service that were in place so you're able to do this and you don't have to recreate things. Additionally, under the BDC, there are some states that are requesting additional information. The next overview that we're going to do is we're just going to talk a little bit about USF rates, Universal Service Fund, Universal Service Fee, FUSF, however you want to put an acronym on it. But you know that this is a fund that is required for all telecommunications providers to report their federal interstate revenues each quarter. It adjusts quarterly. The mechanism that funds that is continuing to drop. You have to think when USF came about, it was funded by access charges and long distance charges. Well, access charges are just about down to zero, switched access, and long distance charges are nowhere near where they used to be 5 to 10 years ago. And so that whole funding mechanism is dropping. There is a push now to define broadband as a telecom service, making broadband providers contribute to USF. Not a big push, but it could happen in 2023. So again, there's that continued push to define broadband as a telecom service. Expect rates to continue to increase. And just for an overview, the average USF rate for the last 15 quarters has been 26.05%. And that has a low of 19.6%, a high of 33.4%. In the last 7 quarters, just looking at 2021 and year-to-date 2022, the USF average is 29.73%. So think of 29% of every interstate dollar that you collect has USF applied to it. So you can see that's not sustainable. We also talking here about the midterm elections may have some bearing on USF as a telecom service. More to be played out. The midterm elections were done, but we don't know the full fallout of it yet. But just know that USF is going to go through some changes probably in 2023 and beyond, just because you can't keep sustaining the 29 to 30% rate. It's not doable in the marketplace. The last thing we wanted to talk about in the 2022 overview was VoIP issues. And one of the biggest ones that's going to impact a lot of the marketplace is that the slight change in California. And the slight change was that California used to have a very one-page or very easy VoIP registration process. And now it looks like they're making some changes because of some issues that they were having with getting a hold of providers and providers not contributing. So they are going to make it look more like a full version CPCN filing. So think CLEC filings, which took the process now from a 1 month to potentially a 6 month process. So if you're new coming in, once this goes into place, it's going to be a more drawn out registration process. The new process will require you to post a $25,000 performance bond. You're going to have to do some annual financial and operational reporting. You're going to have to pay PUC user fees. And the big thing is if you fail to do these things, there could be subject to penalties. Now, there were some comments where this change, comments were due on October 3rd, reply comments due October 7th. So it's not a finalized decision yet. It's finalized in terms of they're going to do it. They just don't have the final processes in place yet. And so just know that there's going to be more coming out on the California VoIP issues. How is this going to impact your 2023? Well, what's going to happen is, like I said, a longer application time, greater staff review. We talked a little bit about providing potential fines for providing service. There's also what's going to happen if you were registered under the current process and now they go to this larger, bigger process. Are you going to have to re-register? Those are all the things that are going to come out in the new revisions. And so just be prepared. If you are in California, you're a VoIP provider and you haven't registered, register. If you have registered, but you registered under the simplistic procedure, just be prepared that you may get some additional contact information from the commission or may be required to do some other long-term looks at this. So very simplistic look back at 2022. We talked about 4 items. I'm sure we could have talked about 40 items if we really wanted to. We just grabbed the most important things that we thought for you to know about 2022. So now we're going to take some time and we're going to look over the horizon and see what's going to come out in 2023. The first thing we're going to look at is we are going to talk about some quarterly regulatory fee and fund changes. And just again, these are a few of them. This is just a sampling of what we found. There is probably more. And again, if I would have showed you everything that's going to happen in the first quarter, we'd be here for a day. So free voice communications for incarcerated persons in California will become effective 1/1/2023. That is a big item for the providers that provide services in that marketplace. There's a new 988 surcharge in California. The 988 surcharge is the suicide prevention, suicide helpline surcharge, and that kicks in California on 1/1/2023. Additionally, there are 2 other states that have that surcharge right now, Colorado and Washington, and both of those states are increasing that 988 fee effective January 1st of next year. There's a change in Colorado on a prepaid wireless charge, which will be increasing. There is a municipal broadband fee only applicable to broadband only providers in Georgia. That will increase 1/1/2023. Missouri used to have a USF in place. They sort of put it at abeyance, and now they're bringing it back again. They're reinstating it for 2023. So if you're a Missouri VoIP provider, USF, any provider in Missouri, the USF may kick in again. You have to be prepared to bill it, which Ceretax will be able to handle for you, and report it. So just something to be aware of. And then in Nevada, there's actually some USF contributions are decreasing, and in Nevada there will be a USF decrease. Other over the horizon things that we're looking at. The first time we talked about fees and funds, this time we're going to talk about some other regulatory impacts, other regulatory filings. So there is do not call filings or do not call list filings in 3 states that happen in the first quarter. California requires tier 1 advice letters because they have the fires, they have the floods, they have the earthquakes, and they put out emergency declarations. And when they have those, if you're a certain type of carrier in California, you have to make an advice letter filing to the commission saying that you're going to adhere with their requirements of the emergency declarations. Things you have to know about, and those happen all the time. And there are 3 or 4 that are due in the first quarter. There are some annual re-registration tariff notices in a few states. There's a CP&I filing, customer proprietary network information. It's a filing that's due at the FCC by March 1st of every year. And then there is also Georgia requires you to file a copy of what you filed with the FCC with them. Again, we talked in detail about the FCC BDC in Form 477, but that's coming up in March. So that'll be due March 1. People should start preparing to get that ready to be filed. And then there are 25 other miscellaneous files that are due in the first quarter of this year. And when we do miscellaneous filings, we're talking about things like area code overlays where you may have to do something, various state required filings that you may have to make, some contract filings that you may have to make in Georgia, and TRS and other type of filings that you need to make, telecommunications relay services in Minnesota and some other states. Finally, other regulatory matters that we're going to look at is we're going to talk about coming up in 2023. Now, some of these may be second quarter, but again, teeing you up to be prepared for them. Originating access reductions, phase 2. A lot of the carriers last year did their originating access reductions, and they just did it all in one fell swoop. But if you didn't, there is another phase that's coming out that is going to be due sometime in July. Again, prepare yourself for that. Institutional price adjustments, we sort of talked about the California thing. There are some other states that are doing some adjustments with institutional pricing. The continued rollout of the BEAD funding program. The BEAD is the broadband local, and it's sort of the broadband funding, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Fund that came out of the Infrastructure Act. And so they're going to start rolling that out. That is going to be run by the NTIA. And so if you're a broadband provider, if your state has a broadband department, learn about them, find out what they do, how they fund, where are they at in the process, because they're the ones that are going to be working with NTIA to dole out the money. So learn who they are and find out about them in your state. Other things that are happening in the course of this year is going to be the continuation of the RDOF process. The RDOF process went into place in 2020. There was companies that were approved in 2020, started to receive some fund in 2021, but recently there are some companies that had their RDOF funding either rescinded or put on hold for certain issues. And so what's going to happen with that? Is there going to be an RDOF 2? Are we going to start with an additional broadband funding now that we have the BDC? So you can see how some of this is all tying together. The BDC is going to give you a better broadband map. Well, the better broadband map is going to make it better for RDOF issues when they go for funding, because they're going to have a better way of knowing where the additional funding is needed and where broadband service is considered unserved or underserved. Again, things to keep on your horizon as the year goes through. And then just remember your Form 499A is due again April 1. Now's the time to start looking at your revenues for last year, looking at your 499 quarterly filings, and just getting everything ready so you're ready to go for an April 1st reporting deadline on that. The final notes that I have on this is looking over the horizon, closing thoughts. Stay current. Staying current is critical to the value of your company as well as your customer relationships. You have to stay current on all the rules and regulations. Stay in compliance. Make sure your company is in compliance with all of your regulatory obligations. And finally, the only regulatory constant is there is no regulatory constant. So you have to be up and above on all of this stuff and ahead of the curve as it comes at you. Because if not, like the line on a movie, failure to hit a curve. And you don't want to have that to your company. So Brent, that's all I have to do. You have any questions or comments about where we went into 2022 or anything for 2023?
Yeah, actually, Tom, that's great. So first off, thank you. Tremendous amount of information. I think it just speaks to the quality of service you get from a company like Inteserra that Tom can literally speak for half an hour, almost without notes, and go through all of this information. But a couple of things that come to mind as you were talking that I'd like to ask you about that we didn't talk about is one, we talked a little bit about the FCC and the USF obviously being the contributions, the number of people contributing getting lower and lower, which is also causing that percentage that they're charging, that 26%, 26.03 or 08 or whatever the number was that you said as of most recent. That continues to climb. What we're seeing on our side is because of that, there are a lot of companies that are taking more aggressive approaches in the way they kind of label their products and services or define their products and services. And what I mean by that is, you take VoIP for instance. Almost nobody who sells VoIP services, typically sells VoIP services in isolation. It's usually bundled with something else, usually with some type of software component, right? But it also have data and other elements to the bundle. And what we're seeing on our side is that many companies are allocating less and less of their bundle to the actual, voice components or taxable components that are exposed to the FCC and USF charges. A concern we have is whether or not that's going to get to the point where it raises some eyebrows and gets a little bit more scrutiny under audit. Do you have any feeling on that? Do you think that that may be the case in some cases where some people get audited, or do you think that it's just a natural evolution of the way people charge for their products?
Well, I think two things are going to happen along that. I think it is a natural evolution. And the way USAC's running right now is when you file your 499, it automatically comes back and asks you about some of the things that you're talking about because they put more AI behind the program. And
Right.
so they will look at some of the bundles. So you really have to make sure that it gets parceled out properly, it gets allocated properly, it gets billed properly. But then the other thing that goes with that hand in hand is you also have to look at your safe harbor percentage. The FCC safe harbor for VoIP is 64.9% interstate and 35.1% intrastate. But they gave you two other ways of looking at your network, and one is a traffic study. So if you take into consideration your bundle and make sure that it gets allocated properly, and then you look at your network and your traffic and you say, well, wait a minute, why am I reporting 64.9% interstate when I look at my traffic on on my VoIP lines, or any line for that matter, but my VoIP lines, and I see that I have a 30% interstate and 70% intrastate traffic mark. Well, then maybe I have to readjust how I bill the service, because I don't want to bill at 64.9% and report at 30% because that gives you an imbalance. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your bundles are taken in consideration. Like you said, you want to make sure that your safe harbor matches what you're doing, and then report accordingly and bill accordingly. And I think that is going to be that is some of the discussions that I hear from people all the time is, yeah, I'm using a safe harbor, but I don't think I should be. Can you help me with that? Can you help us with that?
Yeah. So I guess in a nutshell, the way I would say that is absolutely there's ways to structure these things with the correct consultation from a group like Inteserra in conjunction with us to kind of minimize your exposure, but you just want to make sure you do it appropriately. As opposed to just kind of taking an extremely aggressive approach that could put you in harm's way, under an audit. So it can be done, I guess is kind of the takeaway.
Yes.
But we kind of just need to work through it and make sure that it's somewhat of I shouldn't say somewhat, but it is a defensible position if and unfortunately when you might get audited.
And one
Yeah,
follow up on that, just as a touch on
sure.
that, you used the audit word, but there's an
Mhm.
audit. There's also an audit that goes on every time somebody comes in and tries to steal your customer, and that is if you're doing it differently than them, and they could show a bill that says that they're billing at a 30% USF rate and you're a interstate rate and you're using a 64.9%, you now become uncompetitive in the marketplace. And that is
Right,
also
right.
an audit that happens anytime a customer gets talked to by another provider.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even really thought about that today. But that's like I said, a good point. One last thing, we touched on some things that have obviously changed, but one thing that I know changed recently in November are just some of the changes to the labeling requirements for broadband. Would you like to maybe give us a couple seconds on that?
Sure. So yeah, the FCC has had a broadband labeling program in place since 2016. About 2016, I believe it came out, and it's on the screen now. When you look at it, you think, boy, that looks like a label that I would find on a box of cereal on a side on my breakfast table. And that's basically what they were shooting for, was something that was very similar to something that consumers already know. And so to put this in a format that says, here are the important things of the broadband services that I'm offering you. Monthly, no, it's not on a box of cereal, but it's something that is put on a provider's website, so a customer could go look at this and see it. Monthly price, any additional charges, is there any discounts and bundles that are you offering? Am I an ACP provider? Remember, we talked a little bit about ACP earlier. Am I an ACP provider? What speeds am I providing you? Download, upload, latency. What type of latency am I getting? How much data is included in my monthly price? And then any other information, network management, privacy, trying to put all the broadband providers services in a similar format. So when a consumer goes to look at them, they can go and look line for line. You go, consumers go shop for cars. Pretty much the labels on a window are pretty much the same in terms of how they're structured. And so that's the same thing as they're trying to do here with the broadband stuff. So these just came out. New changes came out in early November, and then right after that, they had another order that came out that basically was saying, okay, we want to do this now. How are we going to see? So they then went out and sought additional comments from the industry on that, and there are going to be comments due, but they will not be due until 30 days after the publication in the Federal Register, which I don't think has happened yet. And then there'll be reply comments 60 days after that. So there is still the ability to reach out to the commission and comment on things. And we went over the one slide a little bit earlier about where I said the only constant in the regulatory arena is there is no constant. I would like to add a subject to that, and that subsection would be make comments. If your state PUC asks you to make comments and you have a heavy opinion on something, make that comment. Go in and make comments to the commission, FCC or the state. They hear the same comments from the big providers all the time. It's when a little small provider makes a comment that says, your change is going to put me out of business, or your change is going to cause me irreparable harm. They like to hear that. They like to know that. So don't be silent on some of those things.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, maybe the one area where government might actually listen to the small businessman.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree with that.
All right. Awesome. Well, Tom, thank you very much. As you can see, this is just a ton of information, impossible for, the small or even, mid-sized, well, heck, actually, quite frankly, anybody. It's impossible for everybody to keep up with all these things independently, which is why we have companies like Inteserra out there to help you. So on behalf of Ceretax and Inteserra, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us. We hope that you found the information helpful and thought-provoking. Obviously, we'd love to hear from you, both with feedback, questions, or topics for another webinar. We'd always love to hear from you regarding those. So please feel free to contact either of us through the emails that are on the bottom of this slide here. And again, thank you for your time. We look forward to bringing you more webinars in the future.